Hello everybody, this is Dr. Rivera. This is the next video, chapter 13. This is the last section. Chapter 13 is going to be part of your final exam. And in chapter 13 and 14, we're talking about early adulthood. And I'm going to begin talking about physical and cognitive development. And then in chapter 14, I'll talk about social and emotional development. Okay. I'm going to begin here with emerging adulthood. Now, we've already talked about emerging adulthood at the beginning of the semester. I told you that early adulthood usually lasts from around 18 to maybe your mid 40s. And that's a big difference. In cultures that are more traditional, that 18-year-old and that 40-year-old have a lot in common. They are working, they have a life that they have to build, they have a lot of responsibilities. But in our culture, especially in our modern culture, uh, the life of an 18-year-old is distinctly different than the life of a 40-year-old. And so, more and more, we talk about this stage called emerging adulthood. And in emerging adulthood, usually we're talking about someone who is already an adult, so 18 and older, but around till 25, maybe even a little bit longer than that, depending on the individual. Um, okay. Especially in developed nations like ours, sometimes we call the Western world, uh, you have a lot more time to find yourself. You can go to college and then decide this isn't for me, I'm going to try something else. Or decide I'm going to change majors and start all over. You might start a job and decide this is not the job that I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to move to a different state. I'm going to move to a different country. I'm going to go back home, right? There are a lot of movements and changes that someone in emerging adulthood can make and do because they're still not full adults, right? They don't have all the responsibilities of an adult that keep adults stuck in doing their life and the work and taking care of family. Those things haven't developed, at least not for most people between 18 and 25. And so, especially if you live in a country like ours, or if your parents are more affluent, uh, or the government allows for higher education, maybe they pay for it. All of these things allow us to stay in emerging adulthood longer, which is kind of an extended adolescence, where you're an adult, but you're not expected to act and live the life of an adult just yet. Again, emerging adulthood is a time of identity exploration where you try to figure out who am I, what do I want to do, is this the job I want, can I start over, do I have time to start over? You start maybe have a romantic relationship that's lasted years, and you realize this isn't really for me, and you start all over. And it doesn't seem as uh, earth shattering as if your romantic relationship is falling apart when you're in your 40s. It just seems like it's normal in our culture for those changes to occur. It's also a time of instability. Uh, 18 to 25-year-olds don't often have stable jobs, not because they don't want them, but because they're hard to find. Um, Again, romantic partners kind of come and go, living arrangements come and go. Uh, Oftentimes, people used to call my generation, millennials, the boomerang generation. And you guys, Generation Z, is kind of following a very similar trajectory where you move out for college and you come back to mom's house, and when college is over, you move out with a roommate, and that doesn't work out, so you move back into mom and dad's house. And again, it's kind of like a boomerang where you leave and come back, leave and come back. And again, emerging adulthood uh, is also a stage of self focus where people can kind of figure it out. And they don't have to do what society expects of them just yet. But they're still adults and they still can do what they want because they're grown ups and no one's going to tell them no. Now, it's also a stage of uh, feeling in between. So, if you ask a lot of adults between the ages of 18 to 25, do they feel like a grown up yet? Do they feel like an adult? And what you find is that a lot of people say yes and no, and there's less than about 40% of the people, if you look at that red graph here, are saying yes, absolutely, I feel like an adult. But certainly, a lot of them are saying that they feel like an adult. There are a lot of people in emerging adulthood who have started life and who are maybe married and have kids and have a job that needs to be stable so they feel like grown ups. But a lot of people in emerging adulthood don't feel like a full grown up yet. There's a yes and no aspect to it. Hopefully, you're not in that gold or yellow bar that you don't feel like an adult at all. I mean, some of you are still maybe 17 and 18, and that's okay. That makes perfect sense. But you want to start feeling like you have control over your life and you have plans, and that's part of having a good sense of identity. So that way you kind of know where you want, where your values are. And so maybe you don't feel like an adult just yet, but you don't want to feel like not an adult at all when you're around 18 to 25. Now, if you ask the same question to people 28 to 35, and you see that the answers are almost flipped. Most people, most adults, 18 to, excuse me, 28 to 35, are saying yes, I feel like an adult, and uh, it's now the minority who are saying that they kind of yes and no, kind of feel in between, but it still happens. And again, it's because yes, we think of emerging adulthood as being 18 to 25, but that's not a lot in range of age. It's different kind of for everybody. Some people, even later into their 30s, might still feel like they're in that in between, especially if they kept on going and they want to get their masters and maybe they want to get their PhD and they're still kind of living a child's life or a teenager's life because they're so focused on school that they haven't gotten started in their adult life. Uh, so there are a lot of reasons why someone might feel kind of in between, even beyond age 25. But the main point here is that in a culture like ours, that's allowed and it's expected. Let me talk quickly about physical development in early adulthood. Now, remember that early adulthood here, I'm going back to the original age range, which is around 18 to your 40s. Now, uh, obviously, you hit a lot of peaks in early adulthood. Uh, Especially in your 20s, you're going to sort of see better than you are ever going to see as you get older. Your hearing is still good. Your strength, your speed, your endurance, all of these things are still pretty good, especially in your 20s. But by the end of your 20s, and early into your 30s, you're going to start to feel it hit you, especially if you don't keep up with the exercise. If you are still exercising in your early 30s and mid 30s, then you can still feel pretty strong and pretty good. But probably by your late 30s, you're still going to feel it regardless of whether you are exercising and stretching regularly or not. Eventually your body starts to give out a little bit. And so your vision goes down, your hearing might go down, the acuity may go down, and your body starts to feel a little bit more achy, more tired, less energy. Obviously, aging affects your cardiovascular, your respiratory, and immune system. All of those are not as good as you get older. Fertility also declines by the end of early adulthood. So, most people, by the time that they are in their 30s and 40s, women especially, are less likely to be able to get pregnant. Um, and again, also towards the end of your uh, early adulthood, you're going to start seeing a lot of thinning and graying. If you're someone like me, that started really early, right? This is variable for different people. So some people start getting gray hairs in their 20s. I started losing my hair in my late teens, but that's just genetic difference. On average, by the end of your uh, 30s and 40s, you're going to see a lot more thinning and a lot more graying on average. A little bit about health and fitness. So, first of all, in early adulthood, uh, people are still mostly healthy. The average person is still mostly healthy. And so, the average uh, reason, or the most common reasons for why people die in their late teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s, as you can see here, tend to be accidents, especially car accidents, suicide, homicide, that is things like murder, and then you start getting to some of the biological issues, cancer, heart disease, liver disease, or issues that you've been dealing with maybe since birth, congenital problems, etc., etc. And it really won't be until middle and late adulthood that you're going to get those biological diseases becoming prevalent and being the main reason why people die. Heart disease comes up really high by the time that you're in middle and late adulthood. One of the things you'll notice too when you're entering early adulthood is that you're going to start gaining a lot of weight. In adolescence, you could eat a whole lot. And because your body was still growing and using a lot of energy to keep the development going, you really could overeat. And it didn't really affect your weight. But uh, as soon as you hit 18, 19, 20, depending on your family background, etc. If you're not working out, if you're not watching your diet, you're going to start gaining weight because you cannot continue to eat like a teenager when you're in your 20s. You're going to gain weight. And if you want to continue to eat like a teenager, you have to be in the gym uh, maybe an hour to a day just doing cardio to balance that out. Now, if you're doing weight training doesn't really burn fat that much. It's good for building muscle, obviously, but uh, if you're trying to lose weight or keep your weight and you're still eating a lot, then you have to do cardio. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people become obese. There are hereditary reasons, that is biological reasons. Some people don't create certain hormones. Their thyroid glands or their parathyroid glands might not be working correctly, and so they don't burn enough energy. Um, or your body, even though you're working out, it doesn't change fat back into glucose so that you can use it and get rid of the fat. And so some people who are might have sort of a hypothyroid disorders, even though they work out, then they still can't lose the weight. Some people have the opposite, right? A hyper thyroid issue where no matter what, no matter how much they eat, their body doesn't turn the glucose into fat. And so they never have enough fats to gain weight, and that sounds like great, but it actually comes with a lot of other problems. Another issue that you're going to deal with obesity is that people don't know how they don't really know how to diet, and they don't know how to exercise well. And in fact, if you diet too often, especially if you go long periods of time without eating or eating right, um, what starts to happen is what we call adaptive thermogenesis. That is, your body gets used to not eating a lot. And in fact, your body starts to think that maybe the reason you're not eating a lot is because there's not enough food. And so instead of losing weight, your body will start turning everything into fat. And you'll start gaining weight even though you're not eating a whole lot. It's important to eat well. And fasting can work, but you have to do it just right. That is, you have to eat normally, your normal amounts of calories, so about 2,000. I can eat 2,000 calories a day. I am 5 foot 7, 5 foot 8. I'm a man. If you are taller, you can eat a little bit more. If you're shorter, you can eat a little bit. You have to eat a little bit less. Ladies often have to eat a little bit less than their male counterparts. Um, uh, and then when you've been following a good diet and then you start maybe fasting for a day or two, or you do sort of that intermittent fasting for a week or two, then you're going to see pounds shed off. But if you do that too often and for too long, again, your body will start going into that adaptive thermogenesis, and you will stop losing weight. And in fact, you might actually gain weight. Also, stress is related to to gaining weight. First of all, high levels of stress might just people, in order to cope with the stress, will sometimes eat. Eating releases dopamine and serotonin. It makes you feel good, and so some people deal with stress by eating. The opposite also happens too. If you don't eat enough, one of the first things in your brain to kind of shut down is your frontal lobe, all of those executive commands, all of that self control. And so now, you're not really thinking about it, you're hungry, and what do when you get stressed out? You just eat a lot, and after you're done eating, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have ate all of that. But the reason you did that is because your brain didn't have enough energy to power that executive or those executive functions in your frontal lobe that help you to control your impulses. And so it's kind of a catch 22 where you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. You have to do it just right. You have to get used to eating your calories every day. You have to get used to working out every day. And then you can use dieting to lose a couple of extra pounds. Um, I kind of mentioned this. Now, the average adult needs a minimum of 30 minutes of physical activity for at least 5 days a week. And uh, this should be somewhat vigorous activity, jogging. You should probably do push-ups, maybe burpees or something like that. But sometimes people feel that they have to do it all at once. They want to do a whole hour and sort of feel it. And in fact, uh, it's better if you break it up. If you do 5 minutes in the morning and another 5 minutes in the afternoon, and maybe you do another 5 minutes after you have lunch or something like that, and then when you get home from work, you do another 5 minutes. That's actually better because you're working out throughout the day, and your body, gets used to losing that weight. And so, if you do it constantly, uh, there's a chance that your body will start, your metabolism will be such that you don't even gain the weight because your body's used to you doing a lot of work there. And of course, if you work out That reduces the cardiovascular disease. It reduces type 2 or chances of getting type 2 diabetes. And it reduces certain types of cancer. We know that eating too much meat, too much fats, too much sugars can be associated with certain types of cancers. And so, if you're working out enough so that that's not really affecting you, then it increases or decreases the chance that you will get certain types of cancer. You should also try to control how much meat you're eating, how much sugar, especially like white sugar. Your body naturally knows how to break apart the sugars that come from vegetables and fruit. Sometimes we call it fructose. Um, but the white sugar that you add to uh, your drinks that come in your cola, that come in your sports drinks, your body isn't really as too good at breaking that down. And so those have, especially if you're eating them, eating sugar at the levels that we eat them, they may be associated with certain types of cancer. Now, about one third of Americans report living with extreme stress. Stress is not supposed to last long periods of time, right? When you think about a zebra in the savannah, some lion is chasing that zebra. That zebra kind of goes into a panic. Their anxiety turns on. She starts running. But when she runs away from the lion and the lion goes away, her uh, sympathetic nervous system shuts down. Her stress goes away. And that is supposed to be how stress works. It peaks real hard and then shuts down. But we humans do this thing where we have a lot of social stressors: work, school, romantic partners, friendships, parents, and those stressors they're just always there. And so we have these stressors that don't go away. And sometimes we have stress that lasts days, weeks, sometimes even years, because there's so many things happening that we are just sort of in a state of stress all the time. And obviously, that is going to be bad for you psychologically, and it's going to be bad for you physiologically as well. And in fact, people who are stressed out a lot sometimes are likelier to die young. I like to point out that stress by itself doesn't kill you. It's not that all stress is bad. There's a lot of good stress. Excitement is stress. Um, if you're playing a sport and you have the desire to win, that is a type of stress. When you see your friend you haven't seen in a while and you're so happy to see them, that's also a good kind of stress. And those stressors actually are good for you. A lot of times, what psychologists tell people to do is that when you feel stressed out, to sort of change the way you think about it. So you're stressed out about the test and you want to do some cognitive exercises, start thinking, the reason I feel stressed is my body is trying to prepare me to do the best that I can, which is true. That's what stress is about. And so if you can change that mentality from I'm stressed because I'm scared versus I'm stressed because I'm excited, then that's actually a lot healthier and actually more positive. You do better in life. Um, Now, obviously, especially when you're a younger adult and you don't know how to deal with stress well, you often deal with stress in unhealthy ways by skipping meals, staying up all night, smoking more, using food as a coping mechanism, using sex as a coping mechanism. None of these things are going to help with your stress. In fact, they're going to create more problems later on. You want to learn to deal with stress by turning it into good stress, excitement, happiness, or by learning to shut it down when it's not really working. A little bit of sexuality. Now, something that is going to happen more and more in early adulthood is the chances that you're going to have to deal with rape. Now, rape is sex with someone who is not consenting. Sometimes there will be force or a threat of force, but it doesn't always have to involve force. Rape can sometimes be with someone who is unwilling, but goes along with it because of social issues, right? So they're too afraid to say no. Well, they kind of said no, but the other person persisted, and they don't really know how to sort of scream and yell and say, no, I'm not going to do this. And so they end up giving in because of social pressures. That is also rape. If someone is drunk or asleep, um, that is also rape. Sex has to be with someone who is consenting. Now, unfortunately, most types of rape occur with someone that you are acquainted with, and uh, again, those social pressures play a big part of it. Yes, a lot of people do deal with rape that is forced on them with violence, but a lot of rape is through those social pressures. And when acquaintance rape occurs, people are less likely to report that to the police. A date rape is a specific kind of acquaintance rape where essentially you're kind of seeing someone, uh, but that person forces themselves on you. Maybe you have had sex in the past before, but this time you said no, you didn't want to, and the person still persisted. That can also be considered rape. If someone gives you the uh, consent one time, that doesn't mean that you get consent the next time. You have to have consent every single time. If you tell your friend, take $5 from my wallet, that doesn't mean that your friend can take $5 from your wallet whenever they want, right? And the same thing is true with sex. So because someone gave you consent one time, that doesn't mean that is consent forever. Uh, it is their body, and you have to respect that. And the opposite true. When you feel like you have been raped, or you want to make sure that you tell someone about that, and when you feel like you do not want to have sex with someone, you have to say no. You should say no, and you shouldn't be afraid to cause a scene. A lot of times, the weirdness of causing a scene makes you give in to the social pressure. And you have to prepare yourself mentally, think about mentally, if this were to happen to me, I'm going to scream. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's someone I like or someone, that is trying to be nice or has been nice to me in the past. Um, I'm going to scream. I'm going to say no. I'm going to fight back, because you want to make sure that no one takes advantage of your body and your sexuality. Now, a lot of times, rape comes because of certain cultural myths that occur. Um, Men are often taught that when women say no, they actually mean yes, and that you just have to convince them. Uh, and so sometimes a boy will ask a girl out and she'll say no, and adults will tell that boy, well, don't take no as an answer. You have to keep on going. You have to, all girls say no the first time, right? We have to sort of, just as a culture, stop doing that. Also, we tend to blame women and men, right? When men get raped as well, but we often blame the victim for the way that they dress, for the things that they've uh, done in the relationship, in the date, for quote unquote leading on the other person. We often blame the victim, and we very seldom say, no, rape is caused by the rapist. And the only real way to stop rape is by stopping the rapist. Uh, Women who cover up get raped just as much as women who flaunt their sexuality. Because, of course, rape has nothing to do with the victim, it has to do with the perpetrator. There are also sexual myths about the dynamics of sex. Women are often told, or men are often told, that women like to be overpowered and forced into sex. Um, and that may be true for Sally, let's say. But even if that's true for Sally, Sally wants to be overpowered by the man she likes, by the man that she's in a relationship with, not by just any man. And so you can have very specific sexual desires, um, but you still want those sexual desires met by the person that you choose, that you have consented to have sex with, not just some random person. And so, again, we have to get rid of these myths. And even if, if one of these myths kind of does, uh, excuse me, describe someone accurately, someone that you know, it doesn't take away the fact that everybody has the right to consent to how they use their sexuality. Again, men are brought up to be more aggressive and devoid of feminine traits. Some men don't know how to read body language. So sometimes women will say things like, I kind of, I shifted my body. I was trying to let him know that I was not interested with my facial gestures or my body language. But some men, especially the more masculine the man is, the less likely they are at being good at reading those that body language and those facial gestures. Men will often say things to women like, "Why don't you just say what you want? Stop dropping hints and just say the thing that you want." And it's because a lot of men, especially more masculine men, don't know how to read those body languages and facial expressions. That's not an excuse. Um, it's still the perpetrator's fault if they have sex with someone without their consent. But it is something that you want to think about, and you want to get used to saying, "No, I am not going to. No, you may not." And you want to scream and fight if it comes to that. Now, sexual harassment is different from rape. Sexual harassment is often deliberate, repeated, unwanted comment, gestures, and physical contact. Um, uh, Sexual harassment again happens to both men and to women. Usually, the perpetrator is a man, though, whether it's a man or a woman. Do women sexually harass men? Yes, that does happen. Um, uh, because of our social dynamics and gender dynamics, men very seldom care too much when women, are a little bit more sexual or a little bit, talk about sex or something like that or touch them. Uh, but it does absolutely happen. And so whether you're a man or a woman, you need to pay attention to how your behavior is affecting others. Unfortunately, sexual harassment is often trivialized. Again, there's a lot of victim blaming. Oh, Joe didn't mean it that way. Oh, you're just reading too much into that. Joe is just funny. And sometimes they'll even go as far as saying things like, if you report that to HR, you might ruin Joe's life and he might get fired. And all of a sudden now it's on the victim to have to care about Joe's life when clearly this person is not taking the victim into account. Um, Sexual harassment often has to do with power dynamics. It's a way to control people. And so we often think about sexual harassment as something that bosses do to their subordinates. Can it happen from worker to worker? Absolutely, that happens. But even in those cases, there's a lot of power dynamics. People who are posturing, who are trying to show that they're better, they're more important by exploiting the gender or the sexuality of others. Um, there are laws that hold employers accountable if harassment creates a hostile work environment. You want to learn that phrase, hostile work environment. Because if you tell your boss that Joe is annoying and he's always talking and he's bothering you, they're just going to tell you, to deal with it. But as soon as you say he's creating a hostile work environment, that's a legal term. And if you use sexual harassment, hostile work environment, those are legal terms that all of a sudden that manager, if they don't do something about it, they can get in trouble. So you want to learn those kinds of phrases because they're going to pay off in the future. Let's talk a little bit about cognitive development. One of the things that is going to happen in early adulthood is that you're going to notice that there are going to be changes in your level of intelligence. Um, People at the height of their cognitive ability tend to be in their early adulthood stage. But as you get older, memory declines. Verbal skills rarely decline as you get older, but memory does. I want to take some time and talk about crystallized and fluid intelligence. You see the meme at the top. It says, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. In psychology, there isn't really a definition for just the word intelligence. But that definition, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change, is something that we call fluid intelligence. Um, and it's the ability to process information rapidly. If you're young, if you're a teenager, if you're in early adulthood, especially in your 20s and the early 30s, your fluid intelligence is still really high. Um, and your fluid intelligence, as you get older, is going to get low. But in early adulthood, in your adolescent years, your crystallized intelligence is actually quite low because your crystallized intelligence is everything you've learned. Is the breadth of your intelligence up until that point. So obviously, you're the youngest you're ever going to be up until this point. And so you're only going to get older. And you're only going to learn more things. So when you're young, your crystallized intelligence is low, but your fluid intelligence is still really high. And as you get older, it flips. Your crystallized intelligence, the breadth of your knowledge, is immense, but your fluid intelligence slows down. Um, Again, when you're young, if someone gives you a new program to learn, if someone gives you a new social structure, maybe you've never met someone who is transgender. But if you're in your 20s, you're going to figure that out. You're going to figure out pronouns quickly. You're going to figure out dealing with this person's sensibilities quickly because you'll be able to adapt to that change. But as you get older, your fluid intelligence goes down. That's going to be harder for you to do. The same way that it's hard for that 65, 70-year-old to learn a new program on the computer, the same reason uh, same thing is happening when they're trying to learn that new social structure. Here you see, two older individuals trying to play video games. You'll notice that, especially if they're much older, they have a hard time learning the concepts. That same old person is still very brilliant or can still be very brilliant. You still go to mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, hey, how do I do this? Hey, how do I do that? Because they still know a whole lot. What they know, that's that crystallized intelligence, is things that they've learned throughout their life. And so you might go to mom to do your taxes or to dad to help you deal with some issue in your car, let's say, because they've already dealt with that. Uh, Again, when you're young, you can learn new things. But when this gentleman gets older and has to learn how to fix that car using a computer and some new computer programs, That's going to be hard for him to do. It's going to be the young guy who's going to figure it out faster because of fluid intelligence. Uh, you know, asking your grandparents to order an Uber or a Lyft, and be like, no, I can't. I don't know how to do that. Oh, it's so difficult. Um, but they know how to hail a cab just fine because they've done that a million times. Their crystallized intelligence includes that information. Now, I want to talk a little bit about another thing that changes during early adulthood, which is what we call epistemic cognition and dualistic cognition. So, when you're young, when you're a teenager, when you're in early adulthood, in your teens, 20s, you still are dealing with a lot of dualistic thinking. And in fact, if you don't take the time to go beyond that, you can stay in dualistic thinking the rest of your life. What is dualistic thinking? It's dividing your cognitive world into opposites, right and wrong, good and bad, us versus them. And so, a lot of times when you're trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, this fact true or not, you just do it by those basic concepts. Uh, who said it? Is it an expert? Was it a novice? Is this the book says is right, the book says is wrong? Just very simple ways of understanding the world. But hopefully, as you're in college, as you get older and become more intelligent, you start to question your beliefs and your facts. And you start to ask yourself, how do I know that what I know is the truth? It's just because my teacher told me, just because the book said it, just because society says so? Or is there another way to figure this out? And you start caring about books like the one you're seeing there, Lies My Teacher Told Me. You start to, all of this stuff that my teacher told me was just very basic. Or it was kind of wrong, really, when you think about it. It was kind of wrong. And now you care more about how do I know that it's right? And this is epistemic cognition. You want to know why you're accepting something as right. So, in dualistic thought, as I mentioned, you care about what's good or what's bad, wrong or right, what's white or black. Authority versus amateur is another dualistic version. And so, when you come up with a difficult question, of novice or expert, like um, uh, oil being spilled on the ground or in the ocean, and you just kind of go, yeah, some things are good and some things are bad, and that's definitely bad. And so those people who did that have to be bad. That's a dualistic thought. But uh, when you are thinking at a higher level, that epistemic sort of level, you might shift into what we call relativistic thinking. And all of a sudden, you start to realize that there are other issues. It's not just bad or good. And so that same thing, you start asking yourself, well, maybe the executives didn't know that this could happen. And so really, these people aren't really bad. But you might say, hey, should they have known the risks? Maybe they should have known the risks. And that does make them bad. And you might go, well, society also demands oil, and we demand so much that sometimes these executives just have to do dangerous things with oil so that they can get it to us faster. And so they're not really bad guys. They're trying to do something that's good. And you might think, well, was there a safer way, a more ethical way to do this? And you kind of just leaves you with your hands up in the air, saying like, I don't really know, right? Because when things are too relative, when you are capable of looking at things from a lot of different ways, all of a sudden it's hard to figure out, is this right or wrong? And so you're going to hear a lot of people, especially your age, saying things like, who can know what's right or wrong? What's right for me might be right for you or wrong for you. Um, uh, and so, you hear this a lot. No one can really say what's right or wrong. No one uh, can figure it. Right or wrong is societal, is social, and you might end up staying here. This is a type of relativistic thought. But again, hopefully, you will shift and go further than that. Um, and all of a sudden, a way to go higher than that is that you start to give value to the facts. And you might say, did the executives know the risk? Should they have known the risk? And you go, you know what? Some of these facts are more important than others. Maybe the executives didn't know the risk, but I don't really care about that. I don't think that's a valuable point. They should have known the risks because the data was out there. And I think that's more important. That fact is more important. And you give that fact more value. Um, do we as a society demand more oil? And you might say, yeah, it's true that we as a society demand more oil, but there are safer ways to get energy, solar and wind, and maybe some forms of natural gas. Um, and I care more about that fact. That fact that there are ethical ways to get energy is more important than the fact that society demands a lot of energy. And so all of a sudden, what you're doing here is you're giving each fact a certain level of value. You're saying this fact is more important than this one, this fact is more important than that one. And then you make a choice about whether it's good or bad. Importantly, what I the facts that I think are important might not be the same fact that you think are important. And so, two adults who are, for the most part, good people can uh, uh, see the same facts and still end up with different conclusions because you value some facts more than I do, and vice versa. And so, just because someone disagrees with you doesn't necessarily mean that they are a bad person or that they're dumb. In fact, two intelligent people who are good and decent can see the same facts and come to two different conclusions. And that's hard to accept, especially when you're young. But it is a fact that you will eventually have to deal with. Again, as I mentioned, relativistic thinking should change from, you believe blank, so who am I to say what's wrong, to you think that blank is right, but it's really because of your religion or your culture, because you value this fact over this other fact. Um, as I mentioned, as you get older, you should develop pragmatic thought. And pragmatic thought is the realization that uh, in reality, sometimes you have to compromise and you have to accept reality. You believe X and Joe believes Y, and you have to learn to compromise with Joe because you and Joe have to get this done, whatever this happens to be. And if you don't compromise, you'll never get it done. That's the reality. Or, we need more, excuse me, more energy because we use a lot of energy, but we want to get rid of oil. Well, can we do that right away? Are there ways to deal with this with the oil? Or another reality is that global warming is destroying the planet. And so, yeah, we need a lot of oil, and yes, it's going to be really expensive and difficult to change everything to solar and wind, but global warming is still a reality, and you have to deal with that. Not everyone can do this. Even adults, even smart adults, sometimes don't make the mental effort. But uh, if you're trying to be an honest and intelligent individual, pragmatic thought should be that next step in adulthood. Um, With pragmatic thought comes this other issue, which we call cognitive affective complexity. That is, that you can believe things that seem opposite, but you understand them to be part of reality. Um, and so, again, this kind of mature thought allows you to have harbor both positive and negative feelings about a specific issue. And so you might think, I'll never be rich, but I love what I do. And so obviously, you would like to be rich, you would like to make more money, and you don't like that your job doesn't pay that much, but you enjoy the work. And so you value that. And so you can basically hold two different ideas or two different feelings about the issue. I don't like oil. I think oil is destroying the planet. But man, I also understand that society demands a lot of oil, or you know society demands a lot of oil. We need a lot of it, but also global warming is a real thing, and an adult can hold all of these ideas in their mind and feel good and bad and complex about the issues, and yet try to resolve them using or taking into account reality. This is difficult. Not everybody does it, but it is uh, something that you should be able to do as you get older and as you get to be more intelligent. Okay. As I mentioned, just kind of going back to this post-formal thinking, as you become an adult, your knowledge becomes more specialized. And so sometimes what ends up happening is, maybe you were great at algebra or calculus, but you haven't used that in a long time. And so you stop using it. And so that knowledge kind of fades away a little bit. And uh, you start to focus more on the specialized skills for your job, for your everyday life. Post-formal people are also less egocentric than adolescents. Um, uh, the the early presenting of early adulthood, uh, will often think about how other people feel, and other people's issues, and they don't take it quite as personally. When you are in your mid 20s and your friend says, "Oh, I can't go because I got to go to work. I can't go to the party because I got to go to work tomorrow." The 20-year-old, or I should say the 24, 25-year-old, is going to be like, "Yeah, I get it." Where oftentimes even an 18, 20-year-old is still sometimes overcome by their egocentrism. They're like, no, you have to come out. You're going to ruin the day, or you're going to ruin the night if you don't come out with us, because you're still sort of very egocentric. That emotional desire to not see other people's perspective is still very present. As you get older, that dies down. Again, more relativistic as you get older, but you do need to uh, sort of learn to do that well. And also, hopefully, as you get older, you make good commitments. You're able to not just say, yeah, everybody's different, everybody thinks different, but you were able to take that next step to say, you know what, yes, everybody thinks differently, but some people, but I value this fact over that one, and so I am making a commitment to my values. Okay. Um, oh, one more point here. Uh, Post-formal thinking is kind of like emerging adulthood. It is not a new theory, but it is a set of theories that there isn't a lot of data on it just yet. Not decades worth of data, I should say. And also, they're different depending on the society that you live in. And so not all societies get to post-formal thinking. Not all societies have the ability to be in emerging adulthood. And so the consensus of how often it happens, when it happens, which cultures does it happen in, that's still data that isn't really there because we need more studies. But it is something that we absolutely do see in our culture. Okay. Well, you're also going to read a little bit about college and cognitive development. I just want to hit some brief points here. Boys and men tend to enter the STEM fields more often than women. STEM fields being excuse me, science, technology, engineering, and math. Uh, and men also tend to score higher than women in their SAT scores for, especially for things like math and science. Um, However, there is a lot of data that suggests that these differences are minor, and so they're statistically they're there, but they are very minor, so that the difference in scores isn't that high. Um, Sometimes you get weird things where like boys do better than women, but also boys tend to also do worse than women, and women are sort of in the middle range. Uh, Another issue that we tend to see is that when men are good in STEM fields, they tend to be good in math and science, technology and engineering, but they're also not very good at other skills, like, for example, being empathic, being socially aware, dealing with people well, having good social skills. And so when a man is good with math and science and they have to choose a career, they're much more likely to go to the career in the STEM fields. On the other hand, women can be good at math and science. The data shows that, yes, statistically, men sometimes show a little bit higher scores, but women also do well in math and science, obviously, because women, uh, there is no real difference in the way men and women think. But women, because society sort of pushes women to be better at social skills, to be more empathetic, etc., when women are good at math and sciences, they tend to also be good at other things, like being empathic, like being social. And so a lot of women who are proficient in math don't always choose a math career. Sometimes they choose another career, like being a teacher or being a nurse, uh, or let's say interior decorating, because they like that more. They're still good at math, but they enjoy that more. And so what we see here is that these differences that we see between men and women in the STEM fields seem to be more social than anything else. And so, yeah, we want to get more women into the STEM field, but we also want to get more men into fields that are more traditional female fields. Um, Also, in excuse me, school and college, you tend to get a chance to meet people who see the world differently than you do, different religions, different political backgrounds, different ethnicities. You obviously want to embrace these opportunities. Go to your friend's religious ceremony and see if you like that. Learn from them. Uh, this is a great time to learn from other people that are different from you. And oftentimes, you don't get the chance to do that uh, outside of college or outside of um, early adulthood. Because when you're young, you usually live in an area where everybody's kind of like you. And when you're older, you'll eventually get a job with people that are very similar to you, live in a neighborhood with people who are very similar to you. And so, again, you don't always get a chance to learn from other people. So, take the opportunity. Um, I kind of the same thing here. Um, all right, I want to talk a little bit about career development. So again, in early adulthood, one of the things that changes, one of those important aspects of early adulthood, is that you're going to get a job. And the reason you're going to get a job is because you want to make some money. You want to have a living. Hopefully, you're going to get a good job that ensures future security. Maybe they'll offer fringe benefits like 401ks or um, uh, insurance, life insurance, health insurance. Hopefully, though, the job that you're choosing has also intrinsic motives, like uh, you like the job, it makes you feel good, it fulfills you, you enjoy the people that you work with. Maybe you enjoy the role that you play. You're a teacher or a cop, and you like the way that makes you feel. These are intrinsic motives. We all obviously go to work because of the paycheck, but we also hopefully go to work because we like it. I haven't always loved all of my jobs. I was a middle school teacher. I worked for a bank. I worked for SeaWorld. I didn't love those jobs. They were boring, or they were super stressful, or they made me do things I didn't think were ethically appropriate, like when I worked at the bank. Um, but this job, right, as a professor, I love this job. This job comes with a lot of intrinsic motive. It makes me feel good. I love what I do. I love learning new things. I enjoy interacting with students. Um, Not everybody gets a chance to do that. Sometimes the pay is more important than the intrinsic motive. Because if you have mouths to feed, you need the job that pays the most. But hopefully, you will get the opportunity to have a job that has a lot of intrinsic value to you. Now, another thing that occurs is what we call super stages of career development. Is that um, depending on how old you are, the kind of job that you want changes. When you are a child, there is a fantasy stage. So here, children have unrealistic concepts of what they can do for their job. If they're young enough, they're going to say things like, I want to be a butterfly, or I want to be a ninja, or I want to be a Rambo. And you're like, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. But here, what the kids are thinking about is that the job is fun, that it gives a lot of um, glamour, or it's interesting. And of course, the job is so fantastic, I want to be Superman, that it has nothing to do with reality. By the time you're around 11, your choices become a little bit more realistic, but they're not exactly perfectly realistic. Uh, in the tentative choice stage, the children often choose jobs that are based on glamour, making a lot of money. They're more realistic because they're based on interest and ability and limitations. And they're not telling you that they want to be a butterfly, that they want to be Rambo anymore. But they might tell you, I want to be a doctor. Why? Because I want to be rich. Or I want to be a superstar or a baseball player. Why? Because I want to be famous. And their ideas about who they want to be don't really have to do too much with reality. It's more about the glamour or about how interesting it looks, etc. Now, hopefully, right now, you are entering this realistic choice stage where now all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't, I got to choose a job that I can actually do and that it's available. Um, yeah, I mean, technically speaking, you could be an astronaut, but not everybody has that available to them. And so you have to choose a job that is available to you. And so one of the things that you have begun doing is making educational plans to help guide you to that job or that career that you want to get to. Not everyone can do that. Sometimes the realistic choice is I'm going to work at the plant where my dad used to work, where my mom used to work, because that's where everybody works. And so you just do it. Or this is the job I got when I was 18 and life started. And so this is the job that I have now because I can't quit. And so this is, again, the realistic choice stage where you're making plans to have a real job that you can do well, that makes you money. Um, uh, Now, uh, after you've been working for a while, you might go into what we call the maintenance stage, where you're going to settle into a career role. Uh, and usually during your maintenance stage, you might change jobs, but you very seldom change careers. And so, in the realistic choice, you might work, let's say, at McDonald's, and you realize I don't want to do this, and so you'll try changing a whole career. You're gonna go, I don't know, work at an office or maybe go to school and get a brand new job. But once you're in your 30s, maybe even 40s, that's harder to do. And so, yeah, you might quit your job as a fast food worker, but you're still going to go get another job as a fast food worker. Or you quit your job at this office, but you're going to get your job at a different office. Um, uh, Again, because this is kind of your career, and this is you usually look for jobs during your maintenance stages that are similar to what you already know how to do. Um, uh, in the past, the loyalty you had to your employer was really high. Maybe you worked for the same company for 30 years, 40 years, and you retired from that company. That doesn't really happen anymore because jobs don't really allow for that. And so there's a lot more movement in our world now. Regardless, at some point you're going to want to retire. Now, again, not every culture allows people to retire, but ours, for now, does. And so, retirement, of course, is when you leave the workplace and you start, you just live your life at home now. People can become very restless because now they don't have something to do, but eh, so long as you don't fall into a rut, you'll find new things to do, new things that you enjoy, hobbies, family, friendships, going to cruises and trips, maybe volunteering. Um, but you have to kind of learn what it means to be you at the retirement stage. Again, these are all super stages of career development. Okay, guys, I'm going to pause here. In the next video, I'm going to talk still about early adulthood, but I'm going to talk about social and emotional development.